They work in the public sector. They work for the local authority. They work for government agencies. They work for government-funded cultural industries. They work in health. They work in teaching. And when we talk about public sector cuts, let's be clear, it's not about just eliminating waste. It's not about shaving a bit off. It's not even about the timing of it. What the Tories want to do is take out parts of the public sector altogether, never to return. And what they will also do is fatally harm the job prospects of hundreds and thousands of young people coming onto the job market now. The opposition to public sector cuts should not just be about services, it should be about the threat to jobs. And I think that part of defending young people going forward and defending the many women who are heads of households in areas like mine who will lose their jobs and are not going to move to the private sector because the private sector jobs are not in there in the inner city and in other big towns. Part of fighting the public sector cuts is defending jobs for the people that have them, but also opportunities for our young people.
Thank you.
I represent a borough which includes Jarrow, the home of the Jarrow marchers from the 1930s. And although the pictures of the Jarrow marchers are of older people, actually the most telling stories are those that were passed on of the youngsters who went on the Jarrow march. And I want to pick up one thing that Andy said, which I think is really important. His point about connections. The social mobility report that the government published included an idea of a national internship service, which would have broken down precisely these charmed circles that operate, and that seems to me to be the sort of idea that would cap or engage precisely the point that you're making. I just want to make a couple of points. First of all, this is about economic policy. It's not just about microeconomic policy. It's not just about the welfare state and the Future Jobs Fund, which asks a lot but gives a lot as well. It's also about macroeconomic policy. And the truth is, we fought the last election about £6 billion, and that is a technical argument. But actually, macroeconomics is a political argument. That's why it's called political economy. And political economy says that your values have to drive your macroeconomics. It's not just a difference between a technical argument between Keynesians and neoclassical economics. It's actually a far more fundamental thing than that, and we have to have the argument out. Because the Tory argument is that deficits are immoral. We have to take on the argument that actually sometimes deficits are necessary if you're to serve the society that you live in. But economic policy is not enough. We have to look at education as well. And one of the boldest things that we did in 13 years of government was to set the 50% target for entry into higher education, 2-year degrees as well as 3-year degrees. The saddest thing is we're still at 44%, not at 50%. Now, the importance of that is as follows. The Tory argument is that more means worse. Our argument is that more, whether it be education or other aspects of the welfare state, actually creates a platform from which people can really go and make the most of themselves. And it's not just the 10,000 places that they're cutting. We have to take on that fundamental argument that if you want to be a modern, productive, fair society in the modern world, 50% going into higher education is the bare minimum for a decent society in the 21st century.
I think you've had excellent answers from all my fellow panellists. Let me just add one further thing to give proper time for the audience to ask questions, which is we need microeconomic policy, we need macroeconomic policy, we need education policy, we also need industrial policy. And the truth is that I was proud of what we did in the last 18 months in government on industrial policy, but we came to it far too late. We thought that actually just acting on the so-called supply side of the economy would create the jobs that we needed for the future. But that didn't happen. Now, we're now the leader in the offshore wind industry, and we're starting to create, if the current government doesn't mess it up, create jobs in that industry. And this isn't just an abstract argument. I see it in my own constituency, an ex-mining constituency. And the truth is that many of the jobs that are available to people who don't go to university don't give them the kind of recognition and the kind of opportunity that those old jobs could give them. Now, those jobs aren't coming back. But what is absolutely fundamental for whoever is the next Labour leader is they put an active industrial policy, including with a reform of the banking system, potentially staying in public ownership, part of the banking system, to create those industrial jobs of the future. Because if you don't do that, we will end up with an economy which is increasingly divided between those well-paid, high-paying, good jobs and jobs at the bottom of the labour market.
I think after that it would be nice to carry on with the economic theme for the next question. So, do I have any questions on anyone who would like to ask perhaps about proportions of taxation rises and spending cuts? Or any question of that variety, and preferably from a woman? Yes. Is yours of that variety? Yes. No, the woman sitting next to you.
Possibly it might be a similar question. Anyway, we'll see. Yes, I've been finding it very frustrating, the terms of debate during the general election and the general terms of debate too here, the leadership. Because the real challenges that face us now, it's the state of the global economy, it's the state of the whole capitalist system. It's also what we're going to do about climate change. Carry on. Okay, sorry. Oh, right, I'd like to... Oh, sorry, my question isn't clear enough. I'd like to know, really, what your position is, then, a very specific thing on the relationship between, the ratio between cuts and taxation, and how you would see... And also, I would like specific comment on the implications of mass unemployment if on the tax intake and your view on applying a Keynesian approach. Okay.
Andy, it's for you to start this one.
Yeah, I'll deal with the first bit of the question, or the first point you made about it being a good debate. It has been a really good debate, all the hustings so far. And just to make a very quick point, we were all, most of us, very loyal servants of the government, and I think you saw us out there. I mean that in the nicest way, of course. We're all friends now. And we made our arguments out there in a very loyal and dedicated way. And I think that people might see this as surprising now, but we can speak with our own voices much more. And I think that's going to be good for the Labour Party. I know people shouldn't see that as a negative, because I think that is just where we are. But in terms of the broad point of your question, I would say our problem was that the world changed with the recession and then the credit crunch. And it left us a little bit kind of wrong-footed, in my view. I said at the beginning, we'd courted elites. And for me, I'm not going to trash the record of the government, because like everybody else said, I'm very proud of what we did. But the heart of where we went wrong for me was this courting elites, an impression given that we were seduced by power, by glamour, by money. That's the impression that was given. So when it came to the recession, it looked like we were stepping in to support bankers rather than help the economy and support ordinary people. I'm just trying to reflect. And now our job is to absorb how the world changed and how people's values have changed, and respond as a Labour Party to that changed world with different attitudes to tax and spending. Personally, I think we were too timid on tax throughout our time in government. And I say that not in anger, but just in a sense, I tried to make the argument for the reform of social care towards the end of the government. And actually, I personally thought we could have persuaded people about a care levy on estates, or as they called it, a death tax. I still think that's the fairest way to fund social care going forward. But we had got ourselves into a position where we just felt we just could never raise a new tax for fear of being pulled to pieces by the press. And we've got to move out of that. The answer to this situation, lastly, going forward, is it has to be a mix. We should support spending reductions where they make sense and where they don't cross the red lines that I mentioned a moment ago. We have to be responsible as a Labour Party there. But we should say, and make a principled argument to say, we should also raise tax where it's right to raise tax. And a tax on financial transactions would speak to the public mood right now. It would be the right response to the mess that we're in, and it would have broad public support. It's a Labour Party policy people could get behind, in my view.